Thanks very much. Just to clarify, I'm actually a member of the National Steering Committee DPAC and have been for the last two and a half years now. But just before I sort of start, I mean, I think it's great that I'm sitting and coming in between Susan giving us that economic outlook and that broad explanation of exactly what's behind this crisis and why this is an ideological attack by this government, far more than it's anything to do with the financial situation that we've been in and are in now. And between Jim there talking about one of the bedrocks of the welfare state, our National Health Service. To give you a bit of background, I work in South London where I live in Lambeth, and I work there in adult social care. I work in my local in Lambeth Council. I work with adults with disabilities in a social work team. So if you like, I'm the community side of the area that Jim's talking about, the welfare state, in my work capacity. But obviously here I'm talking about disabled people. And the first thing I'll say, and then I'll go on to what I really want to talk about, is of course a lot of disability is created. When we hear Susan talking about this driving down the wages at the bottom, the growing gap between the rich and the poor, and how that translates itself in their view of how society be organised, about how our support systems, how our welfare systems are based in the way that Jim is talking about, in the way that privatisation creeping in, and the removal of the state and the safety net that's represented by the welfare state as an underpinning for what disability is. A lot of disability we know is created. Now, just a little bit of interest for you, what's sitting on the net, this is a GPS system, a sat-nav. Yeah, and switched it on, I thought it was a bit early at the tube station. It's got a lovely little thing on it called What's Around. And I can press it, and in a few seconds it will come up with a list of number of different shops and institutions and banks and things that are in the area. It's a lovely little snapshot of the local area if I've never been there before and I go out. And what did I find? Well, I've been aboard with me need to know. Because I knew what was going to be there. It came up with McDonald's, it came up with Subway, it came up with Tesco's Express, it came up with the coffee shops, it came up with a plethora of fish and chip shops, and I think it's the Genghis Khan. And a couple of other tandoori's and the Chinese takeaway. I wonder what they would say if I went to Leafy Harrogate or some of these other areas and press What's Around. What we see in this country is an epidemic growing in terms of health. But I see it in the work that I do, with the rise of an epidemic of obesity and diabetes. It's not just in terms of overall numbers in our population, but affecting younger and younger parts of our population as well. And these conditions are killers. The biggest cause of sight loss, preventable sight loss in this country, is diabetic retinopathy. And the reason for that is McDonald's, KFC, poor diets and all the rest of it, fizzy drinks and all of the rubbish that is poor people's food and what they're stuffing our home streets with. That's the cost of living without a welfare state when privatisation is left to run wild. And we'll see that affects a certain percentage of the population. Others can afford the option to go elsewhere. Okay, lecture over in terms of that. Go and get your eyes tested, keep your diet sorted out. You don't want to get some of these conditions and they're preventable. Okay, disabled people against cuts. We've been fighting now against this government for 2 years, as many of you know. We formed the Tory Climate Conference just as I was elected back 2.5 years ago on that very rainy day at the TUC demonstrations already organised with the Right to Work campaign. We formed formally in just before the TUC march in March 2 years ago now, I think it was, 250,000 people, and disabled people, we forced our way onto that march. The TEC welcome was actually in the end after we knocked the door hard enough. And we showed that disabled people were not on the margins of fighting back against what this government's doing, or we're right at the forefront of it. Why are we at the forefront of it? Because we've been one of the first groups to be hit very, very hard indeed. And how hard we've been hit. But one thing we've been absolutely clear about from the start, we recognise what this government was doing, and we've been clear in saying we are not the hardest hit, we're not special case, we're getting it hard, we're getting it in a brutal and vicious way from this government, but what's happening to us is just a precursor of what's coming. And on April the 1st of this year, and I take no gratification whatsoever in saying this, won't we prove right? And what happened? What happened when this government got in? We saw the first thing. Sustained attack on people on benefits and disabled people in particular, from government ministers and the right-wing media. In the same way that we've seen that awful round the Daily Mail attack asylum seekers in the past, running page after page after page after page of immigrant scare stories, migrant scare stories, week after week after week. And we know what happened with the rise in hate crime against those groups when it did. It turned that attention on us, and boy, wasn't it successful. What we saw was that dedication increasing right the way through and up to the Paralympic Games last year. And this is one of the things that's forced this season. We didn't fight because we love going out there fighting. We've got a lot of barriers, just getting up in the morning, just getting about our daily lives around the barriers, or it's quite hard enough. We don't want to be fighting. We've got the choice and we've got to organise, but we were clear we can't win this fight on our own. It's a generalised attack, and we're going to have to unite with other groups around this. So the first thing we learned was the need for unity. We united with groups like Buchanan Cup. We united with groups like Boycott Workfare. We got in touch with the trade unions and got support for the campaigning and activity we're doing. So when we got involved in the process, when we got involved particularly in the big protest you saw last year in the lead up to the Paralympics, with our week of actions against ATOS. Remember previously we'd been engaged in some roadblocks around Workfare, Regent Street and Trafalgar Square, but we stepped it up when the situation with ATOS came in. And what was ATOS? ATOS was a privatised company bought in to remove people from benefits. Privatised company originally had been operating in America, or it was a French-owned company, and had been kicked out of America, kicked out of several American states, who local legislators described it as disability deniers. These are not medical experts, they're here to do one thing, which is to deliver government targets, and the target was to reduce unemployment benefit by 20%, and the easiest target to attack with disabled people. Not just because of the barriers that we face fighting back and getting to tribunals and putting our cases forward, but they thought we could easily be seen as a marginalised group on society, separated out by the vilification, calling this benefit crown to streets, cheats and everything else like that. So that was the climate that we started fighting in. And you saw the effect of what we were able to do against that massive attack by the media, the press and everything, with all the resources they had on its own. A few dozen disabled people, or several thousand around the country actually. But with those small protests that we did in London, that we started hitting the national media in a big way. And of course it was partly because of the direct actions. And that was absolutely intentional, because we knew that was going to be something that would get the pictures, it would get the press attention, it would get us on the front pages. But underneath it has been this consistent work of making links in unity with every other group we could, because we knew we were going to have to stand up and start fighting with everybody else again. So we saw what happened when Osborne, when Graham, when Theresa May stood up in the Paralympic Stadium and thought that they could stand there and bask in the glory of the Paralympic athletes. And when ATOS could do that too, and they were met with 80,000 people not cheering but cheering. And we were proud, not to have called that, we didn't, but we don't believe that would have happened if that hadn't been for disabled people fighting back and putting the lies into the public's mind. And so it shows that when we can begin to fight back, when we can be, and we got massive support from that, but the attacks have continued. And we've seen that continue, because in the second week of the Paralympic Games we saw two things happen. We saw that in the second week of the Paralympics the number of disability hate crimes had actually gone up. And the other thing we found out was that in the week before the Paralympics started, the government knowing that 23 disabled people a week were dying as a result of the work capability assessments, according to the coroner's report, cited them as a contributing factor. The government's reaction was to reward us with a £400 million contract for the change from disability to learning benefit. That tells you exactly what these people are about, and it shows you exactly what they think of this and how they're going to continue fighting. So we saw all this happen, but we also saw was this was not just one attack on one particular benefit, but this was part of the same sustained attack cumulatively on benefits, but also on every other aspect of our lives as well. As we saw, Susan talked about the number of women that work in the public sector. This is also very true of disabled people. The victories we won in the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s allowed many more of us to get back into the workplace, or to come into the workplace for the first time ever, after we broke out of the institutions. And so many, the largest numbers of us are in employment, including work in the public sector being the one that's squeezed, and we're the least productive forces, seen as the least productive, we're on the front line of ways to be pushed out. And what more clear example could there have been of that than the attack on the rental factories? 1,700 disabled people. I've met many of them with 20, 30, 40 years experience, thank you, Chair. those people are never going to work again. The claim that this was a victory, that this was a move away from segregation. These factories exist in the areas of the highest unemployment and deprivation in the country, in Swansea, in Barking, in the north and north-east of England and up in Scotland. Those are no jobs, those people are still unemployed, but every one of them has been found fit for work. They would do, they were working anyway. From workless to shirtless, in one easy move, those people's lives have been ruined and thrown on the scrap heap. So that's the scale of the fight. On April 1st, the stakes were raised. And we saw what happened with the introduction of the bedroom tax, but also the whole raft of benefits leading up to incapacity, leading up to universal credits. And the one thing we have to be very clear on is, although we've been at the heart of setting up the National Anti-Bedroom Tax and Benefit Justice Federation, we've got to come up with a snap of the title for that one. But the second part is important, because you don't get evicted to the bedroom tax, you get evicted for rent arrears. And people are hanging on. People will find ways to pay the extra £20 where they can. They'll find ways of sprinkling and saving. But sooner or later those debts can accumulate, and they're going to get hit by others. They get hit by the housing cap on benefits when it comes in. It's being rolled out gradually across London, as we know. People are being hit, disabled people, by the introduction of the contributions to the council tax. We're being hit because we're going to see 20% reduction in the route from DLA to hit. We're being hit because single parents or carers of young disabled people are going to be losing out £500, £700, £1,500 a year because of the tax that happening there. We're being hit because we're going to see the working family tax credits be attacked, and at the same time they're going in further. But they're putting all of these benefits into one lump sum, so instead of your housing benefit automatically just going to pay your housing benefit and you don't touch it. It'll come into you along with all the other benefits, and you'll have to budget for them on. And everything to do with claiming your benefits will have to be done online. It doesn't matter that 46% of poor people don't have access to the internet at home. It doesn't matter that 56% of disabled people don't have access to the internet at home. It doesn't matter that in some groups of disabled people that figure rises away to 90%. And if you don't put those in, you'll be sanctioned and you'll lose your entire benefit or entitlement, and you'll be left destitute. We now have a vision of a society without a welfare state. Parts of it, we have food banks. Not food banks for the emergency Christmas period. Not food banks for people who really have fallen through the system. The long-term street homes. These are food banks for children. These are food banks for working women. These are food banks for low-paid workers. These are permanent structures out there in our society, because the welfare state is being privatised and taken away from those of us from the bottom. And it'll be rationalised, and it'll be rationed again and again and again. And we'll see more and more evicted. So that's why we've been so instrumental setting up the National Anti-Bedroom Federation, and why we're so proud that we want to see that now build up into an organisation that's as big, as effective as a poll tax as we can. And we're going around from meeting to meeting to meeting, and joining with even more forces as we join with DCH, the unions, Unite, PCS. We're seeing unison come on board at local and regional level, if not at national level so far, and we're seeing the affiliations with many other unions start to pour in. That's the one side of the coin. We're going to continue fighting on that side, but the other side, and we'll finish on this, is we've got to see a fight start with unions as well. We've been proud to be on the big demonstrations. We were on the March demonstration, we were on the 2 million public sector demonstration against pensions, we were on the TUC demonstration at Hyde Park last year. We've been on the BCF picket lines, the job centre buses, we've been on the picket lines with unison workers in social services. We're fighting to avoid the divisions that they want to open up. They want to see us divided, claimant against worker, migrant worker against British worker, women against men, low paid against, every single division. And they want to see us divided, job centre worker against a benefit claim, and we will not let that happen. But we've got to start seeing a fight. PCS want to fight, they're out on their own. We need to see something more from the big unions. And our message to the people of Assembly, we're going to be going there on Saturday, is going to be one simple, clear message. We want the big demonstrations, we want to see a general strike, but we've got to see concerted fight back, starting in the workplaces, fighting against pay, fighting against private. We can't fight against privatisation, but we can fight against pay. We can fight over pensions. We can fight over bullying management. We can fight against the increasing use of targets. We can fight against the divisions in the workplace like they're trying to do on the PCS front line, where you have part-time benefit workers on agency pay, which will be dismissed tomorrow, against full-time workers who tend to be unionised. And we'll need to keep that unity there, otherwise we will see the absurdity that will happen of a a job centre worker full-time, sanctioning their colleagues a part-time job centre worker on benefits, because they ain't searching for work hard enough. That's what we're campaigning against, and that's going to be our message. One-day strikes will not be enough. We cannot afford to wait for Labour in the next election. Too many people would have gone. If you know the names of Stephanie Bottrell, the woman, the grandmother who committed suicide, having lost her husband, who means that she was not going to be able to afford to live in her family home, where her children and grandchildren would not be able to visit because she would have to move to a smaller property. But you won't have heard of the case of Linda Wood, and I'll finish on Linda. Because Linda died just afterwards. Linda was 49 years old. She got her assessment from Athol saying she was fit for work. Linda was a double heart and lung transplant patient who was actually in hospital dying at the time. She died 9 days after the letter she received from Athos and had to write her appeal letter from a hospital bed. Stephanie Bottrell, Linda Wood will not be here to vote in the next election. We can't wait. We have to start the fight now. This government is vicious this week, and we can show, disabled people have shown that we can fight back. We've shown we can get the public support when we're out in the streets, when we're taking that action, we can get massive support. That's what we can do with the wider movement. We need to build it. Let Unity can be part of that. The People's Assembly on Saturday, the best elements of it can be part of that. DPAC guarantees you one thing, we'll be fighting.